All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Climate Action Advisory Committee meeting of the RCPA. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And Drew, if you could do a roll call to start us off, that'd be great.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So I'll just be calling out the names that I see on the screen at the moment. And then if I miss you, please speak up and say hi. So we'll start with Beverly Shore, representing the city of Petaluma.
Here.
We have Tom Conlon representing the Sonoma Valley via Supervisor Gorin.
Hi all.
We have Shirley Johnson representing the city of Rohnert Park.
Here.
We have Pete Gang representing the city of Petaluma.
Here.
We have Julie Royce, hopefully I said that correctly, representing the city of Rohnert Park. And then we have Carrie Fugit representing the 5th district from the county.
Here.
Then I see Julie Kawahara. Did I say that correctly?
You did.
Nice, representing the 5th district of the county as well. I see Steve Bertelbaugh representing the city of Santa Rosa.
Here.
We have Tyra Benoit from the city of Rohnert Park. I see David Leland.
I'm from Galesburg.
Healdsburg, I'm sorry, I'm looking at Julie Roy's title. It says Rohnert Park. My apologies on that.
Okay.
Good morning. So we have David Leland from the city of Sonoma.
Yep.
Let's see, Steve Bertelbaugh from the city of Santa Rosa. Jake McKenzie from this representing the 2nd district of the county.
Present and on the road, so I may not be able to be with you for this whole meeting.
And we're happy to have you here, at least listening. And then I see Michelle Gervais from the town of Windsor.
Hello.
Guests, we have Dan Riley and Lisa Gottreich. Let's see. Well, and then we had Dwayne DeWitt, I believe that's who you are, Dwayne, as a guest. And then Corey O'Donnell from Sonoma County. And then staff, we have Tanya Narath, the Director of Climate Programs in BC CAAC's Climate Change Program Analyst. Can't remember the exact title. And then you have me, Drew Nichols, Clerk of the Board for SCTA and RCPA. And then just joining us now is Suzanne Smith, the Executive Director of SCTA and RCPA.
All right. Thank you, Drew. So I would like to make one other introduction before we launch into the rest of our agenda. So I'd like to introduce Phoebe Golden. She is a Civic Spark Fellow, and she is working with the city of Sebastopol to help them develop a climate action framework and also do some research on the feasibility of a microgrid for the city of Sebastopol. So welcome, Phoebe, and great to have her here with us. So with that, I will go to the next item on our agenda, which is public comment on items that are not on the agenda. And Dwayne, I believe that you were here to make a public comment, so I will turn it over to you. Welcome.
Yes, thank you. You can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, my name is Dwayne DeWitt. I've been a respiratory therapist for over 40 years, and I understand air pollution, and I'm hoping that climate adaptation and climate protection will be something that you folks see is interacting with air pollution. For years, I've done research on numerous topics because my area of Roseland Creek and the Roseland district, which has a high level of childhood asthma cases due to diesel particulate matter pollution, perhaps, needs your help. In the past, I have talked with members of the Bay Area Air Quality Control Management District and had some of them come here to Roseland. As a matter of fact, just by chance today, there's a coincidence that the last time some of them came, they met with Carrie Fugit. She and myself and some others talked with members of the West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project and thought about how we might be able to get their assistance to help with air pollution issues, climate adaptation, community engagement here in our area. I'm glad Ms. Fugit is there today and that you folks could perhaps take the initiative. I saw in your previous documents that you've been paying attention to Greta Thunberg from Sweden. She understands the need for all this also, and the youth in Roseland understand this and brought it up at a recent public hearing. I'm hoping you folks could take the lead and reach out again to David Ralston at the Bay Area Air Quality Management District and Margaret Gordon at the West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project and get those folks up here working. They've got funding. You don't have to pay for it, to help us to get a better approach to climate adaptation and air pollution solutions here in our area. It's very vital. We've been waiting for years to get this undertaken. One of the most basic things you could do is save our trees. Trees are a natural air filter, yet the city of Santa Rosa has been cutting, I'll rephrase that, letting the cutting down of trees occur with reckless abandon. They don't even have a city arborist anymore. They don't have a urban tree inventory. That's needed so we could see about using vegetation to help with pollution control. That's a cost-effective approach. What I'm proposing to you folks is not to spend money, but to actually undertake things that are already in progress at other areas, such as West Oakland, and bring their expertise up here with their funding to help us in our area of Sonoma County. We need a Citizens Advisory Committee to perhaps look into it and give us this opportunity. Otherwise, it won't even be noticed. It'll be overlooked. So thank you for taking the time. I hope Ms. Fouquet, who's now in a different position than she was at the time, could connect in with us again here in Roseland. And I hope she'll remember David Ralston and Margaret Gordon from the West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project and reach out. We've done that in the past. We could do it again. I work with numerous groups in Roseland, Citizens Cleanup Coalition, Roseland Action, Friends of Roseland Creek. We got lots of things that we could work together on if we could find a champion in the Citizens Advisory Committee that you have for the Regional Climate Protection Authority. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you for being here. Are there any other members of the public who would like to make a public comment? If you could just use the raise your hand feature, that would be great. And I don't see any other hands raised. So with that, I will take us to the next item on our agenda, which is the approval of our July 9th, 2021 meeting notes. So are there any corrections or additions to the notes? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. So do we have unanimous consent for those minutes? Anyone opposed?
I do need a motion in a second.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion?
I move to approve.
I second.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. And we have unanimous consent. So it looks like, Drew, the minutes are approved. Thank you all. So next on our agenda is Brown Act training. And this is something that I guess the last time we did a training with the CAAC was about 4 years ago. And so it is something that we like to do every so often. And we have a number of new members to the CAAC. So we thought it would be a great opportunity to provide the training today. So I would like to introduce Corey O'Donnell. She is the Chief Deputy County Counsel, and she supports the RCPA. And we are delighted to have you here today, Corey. So I'll turn it over to you.
Do I have the right screen up, Tanya?
You do. Thanks,
Yes, you
Drew.
do.
Good morning. Good morning, almost afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday. Thanks for the introduction, Tanya. I'm happy to be here today. I have worked with RCPA since RCPA was formed, so it's exciting to get to meet with all of you today and just kind of go over the basics of the Brown Act, because you guys are all lucky enough, and we are thankful for you to be serving on this public body, which is subject to the Brown Act. So Drew, why don't you go ahead and move to the next slide, and thank you for helping me with the slides today. So the Brown Act was passed in 1953 and is really the cornerstone of the open meeting laws for local government. Basically, the idea is it requires local government to conduct its business in open and public meetings, except under very limited circumstances. So next slide, please. And really the intent and the backbone of everything is government officials are elected by the people to govern on behalf of the people. and legislative bodies must discuss, deliberate, and act on the public business openly. The public needs to have access and be able to observe, monitor, and evaluate its legislative bodies. Next slide. All meetings, so these are really the critical pieces of the Brown Act. All meetings of the legislative body of a local agency must be open and public, and all persons must be permitted to attend any meeting. And so that seems simple enough, right? But really the key things are, what's a meeting, what's a legislative body, and what does it mean to be open and public? So if you could go on to the next one. So a legislative body is a commission, a committee like the CAAC, a board or other body of a local agency, whether permanent or temporary, decision-making or advisory, that's created by a formal document or formal action. So one of the big things is always, well, we're just an advisory body. Does that really make us a Brown Act body? And the answer is yes, if these other conditions are also met. So if you could go to the next slide. Oops, there we go. Something. Could you move along? I think there might be some animation in that one or something. Look, go to the one that says, why is the CAAC subject to the Brown Act? There we go.
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, my bad. It's my presentation. I'm just having you run it. So as I mentioned, the RCPA itself, so your mother organization is a local agency itself that is subject to the Brown Act. And whenever a Brown Act body takes action to create a committee, even if it's temporary and advisory, the new committee is considered a quote unquote under the statute, a legislative body that must comply with the Brown Act. So the RCPA directors took formal action to establish and appoint members, all of you, to this committee. Therefore, this committee itself is subject to the Brown Act. And that's why you have an agenda, and that's why we have public comment and all those things. Next slide, please. So there's a question on what if the CAC, sometimes I get this question, forms its own subcommittees. And Drew, I think if you push, there's one other thing on there. There we go. I didn't even know there was animation until we're running it now. So if you take action to form your own subcommittee, that committee itself may or may not be subject to the Brown Act. And what sometimes people are referred to as ad hoc committees. And so a subcommittee that is made up of less than a quorum of your committee, that is for a limited purpose, does not need to comply with the Brown Act. That's an exception to the Brown Act. If you established what's considered a standing committee, that would have a regular meeting schedule and exist for multiple purposes, that would be a Brown Act committee. So if you could go to the next slide, we kind of break down the difference there. So a standing committee is ongoing and indefinite with continuing subject matters that it's looking at, that would be subject to the Brown Act, even if it's less than a quorum. Versus an ad hoc committee is temporary, it's less than a quorum, it has a single purpose, it's dissolved when it's done, and therefore it does not need to comply with Brown Act requirements. So the next big thing is, we talked about what is a legislative body, who does this apply to? The next question is, what is a meeting? And a meeting is a gathering of a majority of the members to hear or discuss any item of business or potential business within the jurisdiction of your committee. A meeting does not have to actually include action. It can simply be just a discussion or information. The fact that you're not taking action doesn't make it not a meeting subject to the Brown Act. Next slide. The biggest trouble and the most common issue is when what you can have what is called a serial meeting. So you're not all sitting in a room or in a Zoom room for what we've been doing for the last 18, 19 months, but you have a continuation of conversations outside of a noticed meeting. And that in and of itself would be considered a meeting in violation of the Brown Act. So it's any kind of communication outside of an open and public meeting that uses a series of communications directly or through intermediaries to discuss, deliberate, or take action on any item is a serial meeting and would be a violation of the Brown Act. So in practice, what this really means is, if you could go to the next slide, this happens with email, for example. So one of you texts or emails somebody else, who then texts or emails somebody else to say, hey, what do you think about this agenda item that we're going to be discussing next week? You know, so-and-so told me they think that we should go forward with it. Somebody else that, you know, a different member doesn't want to. You may be forming a serial meeting if the series of communications involves more than a quorum of your body. So that's really the biggest pitfall that members of commissions and committees really can fall into, is this chain of texting or emailing or side conversations to form a consensus on something that you might be discussing later or have already discussed. So the biggest thing I would say always, my biggest tip on email is, if you ever get an email from Drew to all of you or Tanya, you never do reply all to everybody else. The only exception to that is if you're trying to schedule a meeting, like, hey, we have to move the meeting. Scheduling is allowed, but anything that's substantive is not allowed to be kind of amongst all of you without being a notice public meeting. Just making sure I didn't miss anything I wanted to say. Okay, the other thing that can happen in addition to a serial meeting is what we call hub and spoke. And this, you know, I kind of described it the same way, but you can have one person who's reaching out to multiple people. That person's, you know, the hub reaching out, trying to gain consensus or see where that becomes itself a serial meeting. And that can happen not only by members of the CAAC, but it also could be that staff can't do that either. So that's a reminder to RCPA staff who are listening today, that you cannot yourselves go ask member A, hey, what do you think about this? And then go ask member B, well, member A thinks X, what do you think? That would itself be, you would be facilitating a Brown Act violation in that sense. So staff itself can be, so thanks, Drew. What is not a serial meeting? So what you can do is staff can have individual meetings with each of you to answer questions and provide information. The limitation there is staff and members themselves should not ask questions or answer questions about anybody else's position on anything. So you can have briefing meetings between yourselves and staff one-on-one, as long as you're not trying to find out what anybody else from the committee thinks about the issue. If it's really informational, to answer questions and ask questions and answer questions, if that makes sense. So you get into a lot of questions of like, well, I want to go to this other meeting and a bunch of people from the committee are also going. Is that okay? Well, the answer is usually yes in these circumstances. The Brown Act includes what is not a meeting as part of the statute. Social or ceremonial events like a ribbon cutting ceremony or something like that. Community forums or meetings of other governmental bodies. So for example, if all of you wanted to go to the Board of Supervisors meeting when they're having a discussion on climate action or something, that is absolutely okay for you to go to another body's public meeting and have more than a quorum of you there. And public conferences, say you wanted to go to a climate change conference in Sacramento, or even virtually, all of you being on the same Zoom, that would be absolutely fine. The one exception though, is you have to not discuss amongst yourselves anything off onto the side that would be subject to something that you could be discussing at a CAAC meeting itself, CAAC meeting itself. I said the Brown Act's been in place since 1953 and it has changed over time, including mostly because of technology changes. The core tenets remain the same, but it's, a little behind the times on technology, but it's trying to catch up. But electronic and social media is definitely one of those areas that's ever evolving. And just kind of going back to the same thing, you don't want to text, email, engage in electronic communication amongst with each other. Don't reply all. One of the other things is that it sometimes can be problematic if you are posting comments on social media platforms that you're all on, that becomes sort of like a conversation between yourselves. So if somebody posts something on Facebook and you all start commenting on it, that can end up being problematic and be considered a serial meeting. If you want to share things, whatever else, that's fine, but you just be cognizant of the commenting piece of it. Next piece. This is really just kind of a reminder and going over what does it mean to have the public have notice. And all meetings must be properly prepared, agendized and posted 72 hours in advance on the website. And if you were in physical location, you would have it. And I think that Drew still does this, puts in the windows of the RCPA offices. The agenda needs to include a brief description of the items of business to be discussed. It must be publicly accessible. And one of the new provisions that literally just took effect October 1st is allowing for teleconferencing in certain emergency circumstances like we find ourselves in right now under the state of emergency related to COVID and the health officer's directive to have virtual meetings to the extent possible. So that is why we are still able to operate this way right now. Next slide, please. One of the big things about the reason that you give 72-hour notice and you post an agenda is so that the public can know whether they want to participate in the meeting. So the result of that is that you cannot have a discussion or decision on items that are not on the agenda, because then the public wouldn't have known you were going to talk about it and they wouldn't have had the opportunity to participate. So you can, members or staff can briefly respond to questions posed by the public, but you cannot have a kind of robust discussion on anything that's not been posted on the agenda. Sometimes you could give direction, a member could ask staff to come back to the next meeting with more information on something. But at that point, you cannot actually take, if somebody brings up something new, that would have to be, well, we're going to have to bring this back to the next meeting we have. Let's see. Public comment must be allowed to speak on any specific item on business before or during your consideration of it. And as we started out today's meeting, there needs to be an opportunity for public comment on items that are within the jurisdiction of your committee, but not necessarily on the agenda. And we think, we had a participant in Mr. DeWitt who did that today. One of the things with virtual meetings is you still need to provide that opportunity for public comment live. Thank you. And so why does this matter? Why does this matter to you? Because there's actually pretty serious, significant consequences for violations of the Brown Act. There's a civil lawsuit available. There are attorney's fees available to prevailing parties. So I have, thankfully, in my, I don't know how many years now, 14 plus years working for county council, have not personally have had to deal with any kind of major violation that resulted in this. Sometimes that you have the opportunity to fix anything that potentially wasn't agendized correctly. There's different avenues subject, short of this, but always really important for people to understand that there are these kind of pretty significant penalties that are available if there are willful violations of the Brown Act. Next slide. And there could even be the point of criminal penalties. So I don't need to belabor that. I don't think that's a big issue, but I just want to make sure you know. The League of California Cities has an excellent resource guide that's available at that link on the screen there. And this presentation, if it's already not part of your agenda packet, can be obtained through Drew if you'd like it. And with that, I know I've talked a lot and there might be questions. I think there are a few in the chat. I couldn't quite follow that and talk at the same time, so happy to to look at those now.
I do have this presentation posted on the RCPA website also.
Okay, great. Steve, can hybrid meetings become the norm without violating the Brown Act? They minimize GHG emissions. I totally agree with you that that is right now, the way that the Brown Act has been amended effective October 1st, certain requirements need to be in place, which pretty much means it has to be a state of emergency in place to allow for the teleconferencing provisions like this. Whether that could change in the future to actually address another reason, which would be climate reasons for allowing for the hybrid meetings, that's something that would potentially be something that the legislature might want to look at. But right now, a hybrid format or teleconferencing only is allowed only under these limited circumstances with emergencies.
Okay, Corey, do you want me to read the next question?
Sure, that would be great.
Yeah. So Shirley Johnson asked if the chat function was addressed, and so I guess I'm wondering personally too, as well, as how does the chat function work in these public meetings?
So if the chat is available to everyone to view, I mean, a lot of times in a more formal, for example, the board meetings themselves, the chat function is not operable for people to use. For these kind of advisory committees, I think as long as these questions are part of the transcript of the meeting and are available as part of that, then the public would have access to that information. I would avoid, you should absolutely not be doing one-off individual chats with each other during a meeting, because that potentially is a serial meeting, that potentially is deliberation that's not open in public, versus what right now, this chat right now is visible to everyone, is my understanding. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I think that the chat function is great for being able to do this with questions rather than having to raise your hand. However, best practice, I would argue, would be to not have a chat function during a public meeting so that nobody could mistakenly start individually messaging people.
Well, thank you, Corey. Ty Benoit had asked if we can contact you directly if we have specific questions about the Brown Act.
That is really a question for RCPA staff and how you would like to handle that. My preference would be that questions go through staff, and then I can respond to them in order to maintain attorney-client privilege if there's something that's really sensitive. But so I would start with asking questions to RCPA staff, and they can contact me if they can't answer it themselves.
Yes, I would agree with that, Corey.
Yeah,
so contact me first, or Drew.
Yeah, one of us, and we'll get it over.
Yep.
Let's see. Next question, I see Dwayne DeWitt has his hand up. Dwayne, was it?
Hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you. The question involves materials made available for the public to be able to see and read or understand during that 72-hour pre-meeting situation. There are a number of times when I've gone to community meetings and information is brought forward at the meeting that wasn't on the agenda and it wasn't available to the public before the meeting. Doesn't that seem to be contrary to the stipulation of the Brown Act saying that information the body, whatever one it may be, is going to be discussing and acting upon needs to be available to the public 72 hours beforehand? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Mr. DeWitt. Yes, you are correct that materials need to be posted and available to the public. The agenda needs to be posted and available to the public with a description of what's going to be discussed 72 hours in advance. There are times that the materials that go along with an agenda item might not be available at that point in time and are provided later. They must be provided to the public, available to the public, meaning posted in whatever the format is that you've used to share your agenda and post your agenda on the website. Those need to be made available to the public at the same time they would be made available to the legislative body, even if that's less than the 72 hours.
All right, I don't see any other hands up or any other questions in the chat box.
Okay, great.
All right. Well, thank
Well,
you,
if
Corey.
questions do come to you after, when you look at any of this, feel free to reach out to Tanya and Drew, and they will loop me in if they need to. Thank you again
Sounds
for your
good.
service on the committee.
Thank you, Corey. We appreciate you being here. All right. So with that, I will move us on to our next agenda item, which is our report outs from CAAC members by jurisdiction. So I will just go down our jurisdiction list. And actually, I think that I'm going to start from the other end of the list this time. I started with the city reps last time, and this time I will start with our county reps. And so the first county reps are from Director Hopkins and in the 5th district. So we have Julie. Would you like to give an update?
I don't have anything to update, but thank you.
All right, thank you. And Carrie.
Good morning, everyone. I would love to share my main update is around an effort we've been doing called the Petaluma Equitable Climate Action Coalition, which we believe is a model for equitable community engagement countywide and beyond. And I'm excited to share that the group that was doing this effort of community listening and drafting recommendations for equitable climate action presented last week at a public meeting.
And I'm going to get off.
And their recommendations and a recording of the presentation are on Daily Act's website under climate action, under the Petaluma Equitable Climate Action Coalition. And I would love to encourage anybody interested in kind of how can we more equitably engage communities who have been systemically left out of policy conversations around climate change, to take a look at the recommendations and the presentation as a model. Each of our 6 participants represent different communities of color. They each received $1,800 stipend for participation over the 6 months. They learned about sequestration, adaptation, mitigation, went through the whole climate emergency framework, and were able to provide very powerful recommendations for what they would love to see happen next in the community. So that's been a very large project. I appreciate many of the folks here on the call who were at that presentation. Thank you. And that's our major update. I'm sure Pete will have much more coming out of Petaluma.
Great, thank you, Carrie. Let's see, next up I have Jake McKenzie. I think, is Jake still with us? Yes.
Yeah, Jake still seems to be with you. And I will just report a couple of things going on. You may have noticed in the media that the Conference of Partners number 26 is being held in Scotland, October 31st through I think it's November the 12th. It's my understanding that the chair of the Board of Supervisors, Linda Hopkins, is going to be attending that. I do know that the executive director of the Climate Center, with which I'm associated, Ellie Cohen, is planning to attend. So that's going to be a very interesting event. Chaotic, I will assume, having been at earlier COPs back in 2008, 2009. They don't seem to be the most organized of events, but eventually they come to conclusions sometimes, as happened in Paris a few years back. So we'll be anxiously awaiting to see what happens there. In terms of District 2, I think the members representing Runner Park will no doubt follow up with what I'm about to say, and that is that Winter Park City Council next Tuesday will be considering a draft, and I believe in the workshop, a draft climate change element of the Winter Park City General Plan. In their in passing the emergency resolution earlier on this year, the council stated that they would be following and upholding the policies laid out in RCPA's emergency resolution and laid out in the mobilization strategy. That's my report, and I'm afraid I'm shortly going to have to get on the road on California 1 and 101 and try to make sure we get safely to Thousand Oaks. So apologize, and we'll be talking to you all soon, I'm sure. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jake. All right, next up we have Tom Conlon.
Thank you. Let's see here. I wanted to let folks know that we have had a new city manager in the city of Sonoma, as well as a number of new council members. And they met recently to set some new city goals. The problem was that none of the goals actually directly address climate action. Although there are a few goals that do have a significant nexus to climate. For example, this city is going to begin working on a long-term parking strategy for the Plaza downtown district. Also, general enhancement plans for that Plaza Park and its affordable housing strategy. There's also David Leland's going to report out on the specifics of the draft climate action plan the city's put together. I would just mention that we're fortunate to have a sustainability coordinator, half-time position. And that's a temporary position that the new city manager has indicated does want to continue funding that position. So we'll be talking about that at the budget session. But I think the whole changeover in city government in Sonoma, city of Sonoma, has really set us back. COVID plus the changeover in, frankly, the loss of Logan Harvey, who had been perceived to be such a leader in this area, has really, the city's been scrambling to rebuild that. And one of those things I think that may have been lost in the process is that the city missed out, I believe, on the recent Transportation Authority's call for projects for funding transportation improvements in the city. Other cities in the other jurisdictions in the county did in fact file a response to SCTA's call for projects, but apparently the city of Sonoma did not. And we'll be looking into what the repercussions for that are. We did have, there are a number of meetings coming up. We did just have a joint standing committee, which is the city's Environment Commission and the city's two representatives from the new city council are meeting on climate action issues and trying to resolve whether that needs to be two separate groups, or if maybe we should have a body that is singularly focused on climate action. Sonoma's process has evolved over the years because we started with a community service and environment commission that initially dealt with plaza public events planning, and then environment was appended to that group, and now it's really climate action is really taken over that group. And then we had a recent radio event that Tanya and our city sustainability coordinator presented on, as did I and a member of the city council and a couple of members from the climate action subcommittee. So that's on KSVY's website if anyone wants to hear that 2-hour very good conversation about what we can do in various jurisdictions. That's all I have time. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tom. So now we'll go to our cities, but starting with the town of Windsor. And so Michelle, welcome to the CAAC. I think this is your first meeting, so welcome.
It is, and thank you so much. Just I'm delighted to be here and learning right now, but hope to have something more to say at our next session.
All right. Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Let's see, David Leland from Sonoma.
Hi, this is David, and I'm following up on Tom's report. The city does have a new draft climate action plan, which is great. And along with the joint committee that Tom mentioned, that has a work plan that has reported out on work that's been undertaken and how things are going. The good news there is that we're seeing some accountability, some public documents that are available for everybody to comment on, which hasn't always been the case in Sonoma. So I count that as progress. In the draft action plan, the plan notes, and I guess this is a question for Tanya and the RCPA, that the solid waste numbers for the city are still incomplete. I don't know if that's correct or not, but it's just something that I noticed in the draft climate action plan.
Yeah, so David, we do have the breakout now by jurisdiction, and so I'll definitely get that to Travis and can
Great.
send that to you as well. So yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. The plan is pretty good on SB 1383, the organics reduction. So we're pretty pleased about that. But the major kind of overall flaw in the plan is that it doesn't seem to coordinate very well with the county's 2030 net zero goals, or with any of the other strategies, the Climate Action 2020 or other state level things. So there's some work to be done to tie the pieces together on that. So I think that's the report. Maybe one small addition. I've done a couple of GHG emission inventories, and had been using the ICLEI ClearPath tool, which is now subscription only, and have been looking around for another tool, and got some very good input from the Air Resources Board on this. And there is another, what looks like a pretty good tool out there that is under the auspices of the C40 group, which is global cities with current protocols. And if anyone out there has any feedback on the viability or the quality of that, I'd appreciate it, because I'm about to start using it, and I don't want to go down the wrong path if it's got some serious flaws. Okay, that's my report. Thank you.
All right, thank you, David. Let's see, I don't think we have anyone from Sebastopol. So I'll move on to Santa Rosa. Kevin.
Hi, everybody. I do not have a report from Santa Rosa. Maybe Steve Bertelbaugh does, though.
All right, Steve. Steve, did you have any updates? If you're trying to talk, you're on mute. And, all right, doesn't look like Steve is able to talk right now, but we can always come back to Santa Rosa if Steve wants to add something. So let's go on to Rohnert Park. Julie.
Hi, yes, I have quite a few things. I'll try to go through them quickly. On September 28th, SSU's Dr. Chris Haley, climate activist Chris Meyer, and the environmental coordinator of Rohnert Park, Nick Bennett, presented what they call to the council a brighter future. The Brighter Future is a collaboration effort between Sonoma State University and the local city government that focuses on objectives that can address climate change and environmental stewardship. They presented several ideas to the council, and the council seemed really excited about the ideas. However, because it was not an actual agenda item, there was no action taken. So I definitely recommend you checking out their presentation slides that are linked in the September 28th agenda. And I think that it would be awesome if we could start getting some more involvement with this group of people, because they're really excited about bringing some collaborative work around climate. At that same meeting on September 28th, the Public Works Director gave an update on the city's water conservation efforts. And as a whole, from 2020 to 2021, May and June, the water use did go up slightly, but after greater efforts put in by the city to educate the city residents on these efforts that were needed to reduce water, we had a slight decrease in July by 8%, and then in August, a 16% decrease in water use. We're not quite at our goal of that 20%, but I am hopeful we are getting there. Some programs that they mentioned that are in Roner Park right now to incentivize this water savings is the water savings raffle that's going on in Roner Park. They have a mulch giveaway program. They're also doing cash for grass, and they've been giving away free like water reduction buckets kits for anyone who would like to try to reduce their water usage in Roner Park. A couple other items I have are that Roner Park City is working through voting and almost approving their efforts to use Project Home Key funds to build long-term transitional housing in Roner Park. While that is not directly related to the climate, it has lots of climate impacts, including they are hoping to use a net zero building, renewable energy sources, and also going to keep sustainability in mind when creating those units. Another, I apologize if I'm giving all the updates, but another update is that Mayor Gerard Giudice voted in his endorsement of the RCPA's ban on creating and building expanding gas stations. That was what, a couple weeks ago. So he is hopeful that that draft will be coming to all of the directors, and he will be presenting or getting that on the agenda for a vote in Roner Park. Obviously, no update on how that vote might pan out, but we are hoping to bring that to Roner Park, which is exciting. And two last ones is that the Roner Park City Council voted to ban personal fireworks use, which then went to the residents to vote after a lot of drama. The county just certified that vote today, and by only 318 votes, the Roner Park now joins all other cities in Sonoma County and Sonoma County except Cloverdale in banning personal use fireworks, which does have a great impact on our environment. And as Jake brought up, we will have much more to talk about next time, because this coming Tuesday on October 12th, we are finally bringing back the climate and environmental justice piece that is going into our general plan. They did hire a consultant, and it is like 40+ pages. I personally believe they could push it even further, but I'm really excited to see that we're putting climate plan elements in our general plan, and that they are hardcore focusing on climate and environmental justice pieces. They've also added funding to hire a staff member for the city of Roner Park that completely 100% focuses on climate. And that is, they're looking for a candidate right now. So I feel like that is huge. So yes, lots and lots going on. No major action changes, but like I think we're finally about to see some major action in the next couple months.
All right. Thank you for the update, Julie. And Shirley.
Yes, thank you, Julie. That was a great update. The only thing I have to add is the Roner Park Pedestrian Bicycle Advisory Committee is looking at, well, during our committee meeting, we're looking at a pedestrian bridge that I'm very excited about, going across the 101, connecting the east side to the west side of Rohnert Park. So that's bubbled up and it's high, and it's high on the to-do list in Rohnert Park. So that's very exciting to me because we really need a connector bridge. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Shirley. Let's see, for Petaluma, so we have Beverly Shore.
Yes, the last 2 months in Petaluma, we've concentrated on community outreach. We're going to be amending our general plan, and we wanted to make sure that we heard from every community. And in addition to that, we also had our annual city visioning community outreach. And the most interesting thing to me, I attended several of the community meetings and also the visioning. And you know, there was a remarkably low number of comments for climate priorities, with one exception. And that exception is every community and many of the people who participated in the visioning, trails, bike paths, connectivity, getting cars out of neighborhoods, reducing congestion. And I mean, just across the board. And I see this as a real opportunity for us here to, you know, concentrate on particularly connectivity so that our county is connected with alternate forms of transportation so that we can achieve these other goals, which I think are safety for people and getting people out of their cars and cleaner air. And so anyway, I just thought it was remarkable that almost to the person, we want alternate forms of transportation, and it is a real climate hot spot because so much of the pollution is, you know, car driven. So I see this as a wonderful opportunity for us. And with that, I'll turn it over to Pete, who has.
Thank you, Beverly. Pete.
Thank you, Beverly. Yes, I also wanted to mention that the other big item that has occupied the energy and attention of a lot of people in Petaluma over the last month or more is the Cool City Challenge that I think has come up maybe before in this body. Petaluma is completed an application for this competitive $1 million award, $1 million over the course of 5 years to establish cool blocks to address resilience, water use, energy use, and a few other things. I think at this point, the winners have not officially been announced, but unofficially, it looks very likely that Petaluma will be awarded $1 million. And it's exciting because this helps us advance all of our climate ambitions. The other thing that's been going on that Beverly mentioned is we are now in the process of updating our general plan. And because of the work of the Climate Action Commission in producing the climate emergency framework, part of the mandate for the general plan update is including an integrated climate action plan or climate emergency plan in the process. So that's all very exciting. It's also a little bit frustrating because the time ticks by, and at this point, Petaluma, like as is the case, I believe, in all of our jurisdictions, does not have a viable plan for getting to carbon neutrality within just over 8 years. And so this is not to point the finger at anybody, but just to remind us all that we are still operating on a business as usual way of working, and we need to ramp up our actions by at least a scale of 10. Thanks.
Thank you, Pete. Let's see. Next up is Healdsburg. So Ty.
Thank you. The first person I want to say an extra special thank you to is Tanya and also Suzanne, because since our last meeting, you did come to the Healdsburg City Council meeting and present on the climate mobilization strategy, and that was very helpful. Healdsburg has been absorbed by the issue of water this last few months, and so our conservation analyst has been spending most of her time working on that issue. And it's so inspiring to hear about Petaluma and to hear about Roner Park and to see the things that are taking place. So far, Healdsburg has really not taken a lot of steps to implement its climate emergency resolution. Things are very, very slow. We're not updating our general plan with climate action as a priority. There's still nothing on any kind of official framework, climate action plan, climate committee. Nothing like that is happening. So thank you to all of you for keeping the process going, because I think one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately is just the fact that we can borrow and replicate. I heard Carrie present last night about the CAAC plan, and I also take heart with the Cool City Challenge, even though we're not, eligible for that because we're small. We can have our COPE groups that have really organized up here in the face of the fires and things that we've faced to kind of apply the Cool City or the block challenge to the COPE groups. So that's really helpful. Yeah, so it's slow, like Pete said. If Petaluma needs to ramp up by 10, Healdsburg needs to ramp up by about 100. And so we're just hoping that some of these actions will take place, and I'm happy to be a part of the effort.
Great, thank you, Ty. So Marilyn, I think you are our last update, at least from the jurisdictions.
Well, Ty pretty much gave you the rundown. I'm thinking with all the attention on water, it may help to bring the communities together so that we are ready to organize in neighborhoods and blocks, and that would be helpful. And just a comment, something from one of our council people who represents the Black and Latino neighborhoods, talking about rebates, that a lot of people in the community that she's representing, they really can't afford to save money with a rebate. And so she said maybe gift cards. Well, a lot of us don't think that way. And I think when we start thinking about incentives, we need to reach out to the community that that isn't able to upgrade and electrify, and find out ways to incentivize for them. I saw something this morning, and maybe the rest of you did too, from Habitat for Humanity, that they've created a partnership with Roanoke Park for seniors, forgotten what it's called. And they have $55,000 that are going in to partner with the city to find seniors whose houses are unsafe. And so then the team can go in there and do repairs. And I'm thinking that's possibly a model that, I don't know if it would be Habitat or who, but for finding homes, like in our case, I'm freezing right now because our furnace is broken. We need to get a heat pump. In order to get a heat pump, we would have to insulate this very leaky house, and it ends up being an astronomical endeavor. And so it's easier just to go and fix the gas furnace, which isn't isn't where our hearts want to go. So maybe some of those partnerships that would help people who can't afford to electrify, that's something that we could consider as cities. Let me look at my notes here. I think that's it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Marilyn. And Steve, I see that you're back on screen with us. Did you have an update from Santa Rosa?
Yes, Santa Rosa has had a hard time moving because they're understaffed. But we've had one really good development, that is that the Public Utilities Commission has extended the time to commence construction on the Jennings Crossing, which is an important east-west route for cyclists. We hope that can start in the next 2 years. The other thing is that the FCTA has published a matrix of number of actions, actually 50, that can be taken to reduce greenhouse gases from automobiles. I recommend that that be shared with every member of your city council.
And I think Steve, what you're referencing is in the CTP.
Yes, it's appendix 3.4 of the comprehensive transportation plan.
Okay, well, thank you for mentioning that. Anything else from Santa Rosa, Steve, that you'd like to share?
Not at the moment.
All right, thank you. And I know that we have a couple of members of the public and guests with us here today. So since we've gone around our committee, I'd like to ask if any members of the public would like to make any comments. And if you would, just please raise your hand in the Zoom and we'll call on you. All right, so I don't see any hands raised. So thank you all again for the great updates and for all the work that you're doing in your communities. Really appreciate it very much. And one last comment to David, to your comments about the inventory tools, just to let you know, and we'll certainly bring a more detailed update back to this group in the future, but RCPA is starting to look at plans for our next greenhouse gas inventory. And so BC will be heading that up for us. And so, potentially at one of our meetings early in the new year, we can bring back an update on what we're doing there and tools that we're looking at and all of that. So stay tuned for more information there. All right, with that, let me move us to our next item, which is an update on the Sonoma Climate Mobilization Strategy. And I will turn it over to BC for that update.
Excellent. Thank you, Tanya. Let me share my screen. Let's see. Hopefully I get the right. You are probably seeing the behind the scenes. Okay, great. Does everybody see that?
That looks good.
Okay, fantastic. So I don't think we have that much time. So I wanted to move through this fairly quickly, provide a few updates on what we have been working on here as staff with implementing the Sonoma County Mobilization Strategy. And so here what we have is an overview just of the 6 different initiative areas that the strategy covers and the 13 different major strategies that are identified in the document. This document was adopted by the RCPA board in March. Here is a more detailed listing, and I don't expect people to take this in all at once. These slides will be shared. This is a detailed listing of all of the objectives that have been prioritized by the RCPA board. So we are, Tanya and I and others on staff here are kind of continuing to move the whole strategy forward as best as we can. And then we're giving specific special attention to these priority objectives that have been identified for our most, kind of the most current, the pressing work. Oh, let me go back one. Before I go into the next one, I wanted to give a couple of short updates on this list and then a couple of more detailed updates on the further slides. First, touching on the first, on the top section there on decarbonization on building energy, wanted to let everyone know that Tanya and I have been talking about whether or not to form some sort of standing committee around building energy decarbonization efforts. And the more we think about it, we are we're debating about whether or not the correct way to form that committee, a working group of city staff, would really be around the concept of everything that has to do with buildings, top to bottom, or whether to really focus in on the codes, standards, and zoning aspects of it, and really make it a focused effort, at least at start, with kind of city planning staff. And I think that's the direction that we're going to be heading, and we'll be actually presenting that idea, or at least having an initial discussion about that general idea of how to best interface with city staff on a number of these ordinances that we'd like to see developed. We're going to be meeting with them, I believe, on Thursday, the 21st, and have a discussion with the SCTA's Planning Advisory Committee to get feedback from the planning directors of each of the cities on how would be best to interface with their staff. So we are moving forward on building energy decarbonization, but kind of based upon some advice I've gotten from the county's Energy and Sustainability Division and several others, we're reevaluating what's the best way to interface with the city staff. On initiative B there, on solid waste, there's a number of topics happening, mostly at the state and federal level, or state level, and some local initiatives that have been adopted locally at a number of jurisdictions. On social equity, initiative D at the bottom, this is an area where we have been in conversation with both the county staff as well as Sonoma Clean Power as to how to integrate some of our equity work and community engagement work. And we, under Tanya's leadership, she has scheduled some upcoming trainings that'll take place in October and November, to start here with just some basic equity trainings for SCTA and RCPA staff to help us even kind of formulate what are some of the key issues and questions, and how that we can go deeper as staff and integrate those issues of equity further into the climate mobilization strategy, our implementation of that. So moving on to go a little bit deeper on transportation, Tanya has been doing an incredible amount of work, a lot of work on our EV strategy and the EV partnership. So there's a number of items that are listed here. The other one that I wanted to mention, and it was brought up earlier today during this meeting, was the work that I've been working on for the ordinances to us opposing the construction of new gas stations. And so the RCPA board, as you know, adopted a resolution in early September, which recommends to all local jurisdictions to ban the construction of new gas stations. And we have our first meeting scheduled. We have a meeting scheduled for next Thursday, the 14th, of which I will be meeting with representatives from as many jurisdictions as possible to discuss the issues, basically to share resources and determine what are the next steps at each of the jurisdictions. Some of the cities and towns are ready to move forward very quickly. Some of them are going to take longer. Some have some more, would like to take a more cautious approach. So we're going to be meeting next Thursday to discuss that. The topic of Roanoke Park came up earlier, and I've got at least 2 individuals from Roanoke Park, City of Roanoke Park, who will be in attendance at that, along with representatives from a number of the other 8 jurisdictions. So I know the topic of how quickly these ordinances to ban gas stations has been a topic of conversation, and at least from our perspective, we are taking the next steps as early as next week. And then moving on a little bit, talk a little bit here about carbon sequestration. The main thing that we have worked on over the last month or 2 on carbon sequestration is providing support to the Sonoma Resource Conservation District and the Gold Ridge Resource Conservation District, in addition to the county's Ag and Open Space District, and a number of other organizations, kind of county and other organizations. We've worked to support and help with 2 different grant applications that have gone in. One that has gone into the Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Program, and a second that has been a project proposal that has been submitted to the county's Climate Resilience Fund, and will be discussed and evaluated by the Board of Supervisors sometime, I think, in next January. It will actually come up for discussion on their part. And we've also been attending the meetings of the Sonoma County Forest Conservation Working Group, and attempting to figure out where's our best place where RCPA can fit into those efforts. And let's see, one last update here. Oh, two last things I wanted to share. A number of you are aware that we have been working with Urban Land Institute over the course of the last actually 2 years, I believe, to do a resilience, a resilience report of recommendations for the county. We've gotten their draft report from them. We've provided comments back to ULI and are awaiting their final report, of which our tentative schedule would have us presenting that report to our RCPA board at the November meeting, which is tentatively scheduled for the November meeting, assuming that there's no hiccups with the review and the editing of that document. And the last thing I wanted to share was just a diagram, and this is, I want to make this available for others to look at and to peruse and to offer kind of any feedback on. This is a diagram that we've recently put together, myself and staff from Sonoma Clean Power and the county's Energy and Sustainability Division, that attempts to map out a little bit the overlapping nature of our work, where our specialties are, where our strengths are, with the areas where we're collaborating, and to really kind of differentiate kind of the spaces that we work in. What is RCPA doing versus the county's climate team versus Sonoma Clean Power? Actually, I said the county's climate team. I want to be clear. This has to do with the county's Energy and Sustainability Division, which is in General Services. There's a new addition within the last few months, and that is the county's Climate and Resilience Division that has been formed within the CAO's department. And so that is kind of another, as I look at further evolution of this diagram, I could see that entity and others, many others actually being added to some sort of diagram like this. The Venn diagram model breaks down very quickly beyond 3 or 4. So I'll be looking at other ways to present this information, but this is included as part of the PDF. This may also be in the package, but this will also be included. I'll have Drew send this out separately. That was a little bit of update for me. And so that's all I had. I believe Tanya may have some more to share, and I'm also available, obviously, for questions if there's anything that I just talked about that sparked questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
BC, I do see a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay, great.
If you want to. I think the first one is from Carrie. She says she's curious why the objective to maintain existing carbon stocks was not determined to be a priority.
Let's see. So that is
under sequestration.
Yeah. Yes. Here. I would
and
like
I also want to say thank you because this was awesome. In addition to questions,
I want to stop sharing my screen because there we go. I found that very distracting. When the strategy was adopted by the RCPA board, there were several initiatives and specific objectives that really rose to the top at that point in the discussions in March. And we were really looking for areas where RCPA had existing strengths, existing relationships, and that we could hit the ground running. And so there were several strategies that were really identified at the front. Almost immediately following adoption of the strategy, we realized that there was actually additional opportunities for us to do work in the building energy space. And that was another area where we already had expertise and were already working and could make some kind of had a very specific request that really came from a couple of different entities for us to add that to the priority list. So I think for the short term, those are kind of where we're at. We're continuing to work on the others. And Tanya, I don't know if you want to add any.
No, I think you covered that very well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or Carrie, if you had any other follow up there.
Yeah, I would just love to make a comment, and I think that makes total sense. I want to recommend RCPA voicing support for the efforts of the planning department in updating their comprehensive tree ordinance, because that's a planning process that's very actively underway. Because we are allowing, legally, there's no legal protections for development and clear cutting of our oak woodlands and other woodlands, happening a lot in the North County right now, estimating roughly 100 acres a year of mature old growth woodlands are getting cut down. So this is not anything about fire safety, not urban areas, rural areas. So I don't think it would take a lot of effort on the RCPA side. It would just be voicing support for the process that is already underway and encouraging that to support protecting old growth woodlands. And there is a planning process. They're hoping to have an updated tree management plan in 2022. And there's also a movement to ask for a temporary moratorium on cutting down, developing large swaths over a quarter acre of woodland in the meantime, because so much are being cut down while this ordinance gets updated. So I don't think there would be a lot of action needed. It would just be more like support to all related parties of the importance of these types of legal protections, just recognizing how much carbon they already hold versus how long it takes for like planting a new tree to actually sequester carbon.
And Carrie, if I could ask really quick, that was specific to Petaluma at this point?
No. This is the county planning
The
department.
county plan. Okay,
Yeah.
very good.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to introduce you to any of the planning coordinators there. We're actively in talks with their staff who's overseeing this process, this ordinance update.
I've had this request come from another individual as well, and so I think it's very much something, let's follow up next week.
Thank you, VC.
Very good.
Appreciate it.
And let's see, Tanya, can you help with other questions?
Sure. So I think the other question that I saw back a ways was from Anna Yip about the prioritization process. So what was the prioritization process like with the board? And I guess I could just maybe answer really briefly that we basically, staff presented our recommendations to the board based on what we knew, kind of back to BC's comments in terms of where we felt in the near term we had the capacity, the expertise, and presented that as part of our the adoption process, and the board basically gave that their stamp of approval. And then when we got the additional feedback about the building decarbonization strategies and interest from our member jurisdictions in adding that to the list, we took that back to our board and they agreed to add that. So we didn't have a very in-depth analysis because we don't have all the detailed implementation plans for these strategies. It was more, where should we focus our attention in the near term? And so that's the approach that we took. Let's see, then, let's see. So Tom Conlon wants to know if there's been any progress toward estimating the impact of the county's stepped up vegetation management activities on the sequestration goal. And we haven't done any work on that, so.
No, the one thing I can add though is the Sonoma County Ag Preservation and Open Space District has just hired a new vegetation management coordinator. They've promoted Kim Batchelder into that position. And we have worked with Kim for a number of years. And I hope that we'll be able to meet with him and potentially with Misty Arias, the general manager there, to really kind of figure out how we can work closer together to bring our implementation efforts and our goals together.
Great.
And then, if I can just add really quickly to that, also, sorry, just feeling the camera. The county also has sequestration as a piece of its strategic plan, the 5-year strategic plan. So it's also like the county is very much in the beginning phases of starting to kind of quantify that and evaluate what our options are in terms of increasing the amount that we're sequestering and so forth. So we'll, very happy to work with you all in helping quantify and maybe update and track success on related goals.
And what department is that?
I'm sorry?
What department is that?
So, well, the strategic plan is kind of cross departments. It's throughout the whole county. Ag and open space is definitely one of the leads on that. So is Permit Sonoma. And then our division, the Climate Action Resiliency Division within the CAO's office, is helping oversee all of the implementation for that.
And are there public meetings yet on this topic?
No, there's not public meetings yet on this topic. There will be an update on the strategic plan brought to the board I believe in early February. But beyond there, our specific division is currently growing. We're bringing our lead on in the next 2 weeks, and we'll probably get some game plan going for public engagement probably before February 8th.
Thank you.
Great. Then we have a question from Beverly and Ty. I see that your hand is up too, so we'll definitely get to you as well. But Beverly asked why facilitating alternate forms of transportation aren't included in the Drive Less campaign. And BC, I can answer that quickly if you like. So basically they are. You don't see them on the priority list simply because our board asked us to focus on, again, a subset of those items. But if you look at the full mobilization strategy, they are definitely part of the Drive Less campaign and a very important part. We also have our SCTA recently published the comprehensive transportation plan that Steve mentioned earlier, and that includes a whole matrix of strategies aimed at improving and increasing use of alternate forms of transportation. So definitely recognize the importance of that. And then lastly, it looks like a question from David. BC, you mentioned coordination with the cities. What about the county? One issue that applies more to the county than the cities is displacing propane use on rural properties. Any thoughts on how to do that?
So when I was mentioning coordination with the cities, that's specifically in relation, at least this week, is in relation to the gas station moratorium or the gas station ban. And I'm using the term cities, but the county and Permit Sonoma is definitely being included in those conversations. So, so definitely included. And the issue of kind of propane on rural properties, I don't think I can share anything on that at this point. That's not one that's on kind of the top of our list, but maybe Tanya and I can chat and figure out where that fits. I mean, it's in that type of strategy is part of the larger document with having to do with decarbonizing our entire kind of economy, but no specific work on that right now.
All right. So Ty, you've had your hand patiently raised. So
Well, I didn't want to post anything in the chat because it's a long comment and question. When we talk about the all electric buildings, I think one of the groups of people that really needs to be included in that dialogue is not just city staff. And the reason that I say this is one of the things that we need to do is to talk to those people who are trying to do that. And I consider one of the blessings of the Tubbs fire, in which I was forced to move out of the house that burned into a much smaller all electric remodel in Healdsburg, is that I learned a lot about the process as a consumer of building back all electric. And if you were to just talk to city staff, I don't think you would get that perspective. Additionally, just kind of piggybacking on what Marilyn said about the rebates and the incentives, we really need to make sure that those things are explained and kind of incentivized to both the consumers, and then we have to figure out ways to make it equitable so that people that can't afford these new heat pumps. I mean, I think that the Climate Center is doing a great job with that display that they have in downtown Santa Rosa. If you haven't gone into that, for any of the members of this group, I highly recommend it. But all the incentives that I thought I was going to get for an induction cooktop, which I would have put in anyway, for a heat pump water heater, for a heat pump HVAC system, I got nothing because they didn't qualify in the end, or Bay Ren had discontinued its induction cooktop rebate program. So again, I'm able to absorb those losses, but a lot of people aren't, and we don't get that building back better, I guess we might say, especially when you're trying to recover from the trauma of a fire, which a lot of people in Sonoma County are. And the best advice that I got was a group of fire survivors who were trying to do that. So please include those folks as well as city staff. And maybe we can talk about how to improve that process. So that's what I wanted to say. And that's why it was too long for the chat.
I know we're short on time, but I will respond very briefly. This issue of, when I talk about working with the city staff, it's more on that ordinance point of view. What does it take to change the city codes? and our conversations. I don't have time to go into it today, but we will have a full presentation at our RCPA board meeting on Monday about the work we're doing with Sonoma Clean Power and the county's Energy and Sustainability Division in conjunction with Bayren on more of that, the homeowner, the residential, the customer interface, public facing programs. And so just wanted to clarify, or just wanted to confirm, we're not ignoring that other issues. In some ways, I'm trying to segment them a little bit. So I talk with the city planners about city planning stuff and talk with, say, the building upgrade of kind of building upgrade experts about the building upgrade piece of it. So, but it'd be great to follow up with you some more and get a little bit more of your experience of what you've kind of had to go through. And I very much hear you about the wanting to get the incentives and then having that not pan out. So thank you for the comment. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions from the committee? If not, I would like to check with members of the public to see if anyone would like to make any public comments before we leave this agenda item.
I just want to say thank you for doing the staff training. I really appreciate that, and I just huge kudos.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I don't see any hands raised, and I know that we are at 1 o'clock, so if folks can bear with us just for another couple minutes, what I would suggest is that I bring back the local climate funding options to our next meeting for a more detailed presentation and update, and we'll actually should have more to share by then, but I would like to just give you a very brief update that our board has formed a what they're calling the Funding for Climate Ad Hoc Committee. And they are looking at ways to basically increase funding for climate work in the county, both for the RCPA, for our jurisdictions, to really help accelerate the progress that we're making. I think back to Pete's earlier comment that we really need to, ramp up the actions that we're taking, and a key piece of that will be securing the funding for the many programs that we know need to be implemented. So just a quick update on that. I did include the staff report from an update that I gave to our board last June. And again, I'll bring this topic back to you at our next meeting for a more detailed discussion. So are there any questions or comments on that item, either from the committee or members of the public? No? All right. So the last, well, no, not the last item. So in terms of our update on activities, we've included our activities report. Drew, it looks like you have a question.
I saw Tom raise his hand. I wasn't sure if it was the previous item.
I just wanted to say briefly that Supervisor Gorin reached out to me and asked me to try to get everybody on the same page in support of this future revenue measure. And I would hope, Tanya, that you can take the concern about the sequestration, the questions raised in today's meeting, take that forward, because that's going to make it difficult for us if that issue is not resolved before we go out to the public with a measure. Okay. So I just trying to get ahead of it here. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and just to be clear for the group, so our board has the ad hoc committee, is looking at different funding options, hasn't made any kind of recommendation to our full board yet in terms of, is it a sales tax measure? Is it some kind of bond or some other kind of tax? So we're really in the early phases of looking at the options. So stay tuned. We'll definitely be sharing more information, and that the question about what does the money get spent on and how is it prioritized is really a key piece of whatever the funding mechanism is. So Tom, thank you for that input. So with that, I was going to say about our activities report. We've included that in the agenda packet, and I'll just ask if there's any questions from the committee on other activities that RCPA is working on. And if not, we can move on to our final item. I'm not seeing any hands. So then we have announcements. Are there any announcements from the committee that you'd like to make here in our last minute or two? Yes, Julie.
We have lots of things going on all around the county. So I hope that we could, invite each other to all of them when they come up. And that's just a quick one that I will. And that is that on October 9th at 9:30, we are going to be doing a cleanup and planting and mulching and weeding of the Rotary Peace Garden on Burton Avenue in Rohnert Park.
All right. Thank you, Julie. Any other? Yes, David.
Not, there is a nexus with climate work, but I did get a notice from Daily Axe and others that they are staging a series of 3 workshops on gray water.
Yep.
14th, 21, and 28. And that's something that's of interest to me. And I think maybe all of us who have landscapes that need water, especially if we have a 3rd year of drought. So just heads up on that.
Yeah, great. Thank you for mentioning that one. All right. Any last updates? And Tom, I see that you posted in the chat that an RFP is out for a consultant to begin exploring a sales tax measure. And I believe that RFP is for the fire measure. Is that what you're seeing, Tom? Because we haven't issued anything from RCPA, for example. So just to be clear. Yes, fire measure?
Yes, it's fire related.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Okay, so I think that brings us to the end of our meeting. Thank you all for staying a few minutes late. I will go ahead and adjourn our meeting for the day and look forward to seeing all of you in the next quarter. So thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe until
Yep.
then.
Thank you.
Thank you.